Okay, I guess we're live. It's great of you to watch this, to be with us for this World Plone Day event. I'm Philip Bauer from Munich, and my partner here is
Katja Süss from Zurich.
And we're both gonna talk to you about Plone trainings, and we're gonna give you a sneak preview of a couple of things that you can learn if you want to. So if you go to trainingplone.org, there is a load of trainings on various subjects that are related to Plone. I'll just pick two examples. One is the testing Plone training that Andrea Cecchi wrote for the last conference in Ferrara, and it'll teach, the navigation here obviously broken. It teaches testing the Plone backend, the Python part, in various ways. So if you have a Plone add-on that you write and you have content types, for example, you can test these. And here is really good up-to-date documentation how to do that and how to set up these tests, how to set up robot tests, integration tests, and functional tests, and all that stuff. So this is an excellent training. It's not so recent edition, but it's not really dated yet. And the other one we want to showcase is a very new training created for the last online conference. It's done by Tiberio Ichim, and it's Volto add-ons development. It's a very in-depth, hang on, here it is, a very in-depth training on how to develop Volto add-ons that can be useful for other people. So not only your own project, but write an add-on that is pluggable and all that. It's very in-depth, it's very up-to-date. It will be updated, hopefully, for this year's conference, and it teaches you a lot of really interesting topics on the new Volto front-end. So these two are there, for example. We're going to show you a tiny bit of the mastering Plone training that's been around since Plone 4. It's been updated for Plone 5, and now it's been rewritten mostly for Plone 6. Rewritten because Plone 6 sports a new React-based front end called Volto, and the Mastering Plone 6 development training follows the same basic story that the Mastering Plone training has done from the beginning, but with the Volto front end. So the use case for the training Mastering Plone is to create a website for a fictional Plone conference that happens on Mars in the future, near future, hopefully. And for each chapter where there is something user interface wise, it solves these tasks with the Volto frontend. But in each of these chapters, I'll pick one example. There's a default view for a content type called talk, where the talks for the conference are obviously presented. There is a corresponding chapter to solve the same task, creating a view for talks in the classic backend with server-side render templates. And there's always a link to that and a link back. So this is the Plone Classic one, and here's the Volto one. So you always have both stories in one training. So during the course of the Mastering Plone training, you write an add-on to manage this conference. You write a lot of backend code to create content types, to get upgrade steps, to write your own workflow, to allow submission of talks, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff to learn, especially, well, nothing especially. There's so much to learn. It is really interesting, and we're going to pick one tiny example of this training that very few people have actually ever done, because it's very late in the story, and maybe people get discouraged because there's too much to learn, and it has to do with voting. So the story here is that during the conference, here's, by the way, a screenshot of the front page where it's built with Volto blocks. And during the course of the conference, during the course of building the website for the conference, the attendees are asked to submit talks. So there's a workflow and all that stuff for that. And then you have the conference is approaching, and the organizer committee has 50 talks that were submitted. And now the task is to find out which 30 talks, or I don't know, whatever number, to actually pick for the conference. And this is done with a voting system. So what the training does in this, hang on, this is the wrong link. Where is the link? Extending. So it's far further down in the story. Here. So starting in chapter 44, you write an add-on that solves the abstract use case of allowing users to vote on content with a thumbs up, down, or like +1, -1, or 0, ±0. And this add-on will then be used in the conference add-on to only allow reviewers to vote on these talks. So first you create a package using Mr. Bob or Plone CLI, and then you write a behavior that enables the voting feature for this content type. So in this case, the story is not so much that you extend a content type with an additional field that has the votes in it, but it is only the enabling of a feature, and it uses a custom storage layer, an additional storage layer that is, it uses annotations to store the votes and the hashes for votes. So we'll get to that in a second. And this is a feature done in a behavior. So there's some code to register this behavior. It's called startzel voting. In the package is called startzel votable behavior. It's the code is obviously on GitHub, but the point is to write it yourself in this training. And here is it's basically a marker interface. I'm not going to get too much into that. So it enables the voting behavior. I'll have to say this is still a bit work in progress, so we haven't merged this version yet. Today is Monday. On Wednesday is Plone Day. Maybe we manage to merge this version of the training until Wednesday, so you can actually do that right after this presentation and skip all the other interesting videos of Plone Day. So there is this behavior now, and what we do next after creating this behavior is, I'm going to show you just a bit of the code. There's a folder called votable behavior, and in there is the behavior is registered, and there is a adapter you now write. And the adapter takes care of everything that has to do with votes. So it stores the data in the annotations on the object, the votes, and the information who has voted already, and you build an API to allow to get this information or set this information. So the most important parts of that are votes, which gives you all the votes that have been cast yet, then vote, which is the action to actually vote on something, then also average vote, which gives you a tally of how it's going so far. And there's a helper method to clear all votes, especially useful during development, or if you, as, I don't know, the main organizer of the conference, decide, I'm not going to care about what my review board says, I'm going to decide what's happening. Don't do that. So this is the short version of this adapter that adapts to the talk content type. So let's get that practical. Here is a talk for the conference website, and it doesn't have any voting information yet. But I have this is the classic front end, obviously, and this is the Volto front end, the new front end, and it has showcasing these both worlds are there. So there's a view for talks in classic Plone, and there's a view for talks in Volto. And as an administrator, I can now enable the voting behavior on these content types that we just wrote in quotes. So there is a behavior called voting. I'll save that. And suddenly there is more information, not editing, hang on, sorry. When you view this talk, now there's a new user interface. We'll get to the user interface. Now the voting thing is enabled for this content type. And the point is that you're able to reuse this feature on any content type that you want to have your users to vote on. So this is the API. There's a lot of documentation to read and to learn stuff. There's exercises that will blow your mind, especially regarding this exercise regarding conflict resolution in custom storage layers. So in classic Plone, there is now, if you load this talk, there's a viewlet that renders that is tied to the backend with JavaScript. We're using some helper views that does the vote, getting the information on the votes and the casting of the votes. But in Volto, this doesn't exist yet. In Volto, doesn't know, it does know that the talk component, the talk content type has this behavior, but it has no clue what to do with this behavior because it lacks any information about that. And to solve this issue, in the next chapter, you're writing endpoints that create the possibility for the add-on to get this information and interact with the API that you've written in the adapter for voting. So I'll scroll down a little, and this is how you configure your endpoints. This is basically one endpoint. It has the name votes, and it has different services for 3 different methods, for the get, post, and for the delete method of the request. And it does obviously different things. It gets information, it posts a vote, or it deletes, it purges all existing votes. And the code is rather simple. I'll start with the easiest one, which is getting the information on the votes. This is just a convenience method imported from Plone REST API called service. And the convention is that you have a method called reply that returns the information on the object as JSON. It's JSONified. So the reply method gets vote info, calls vote info as a small helper method here, passing self context, which is the talk, sorry. And here, not a lot of stuff is done. The most important thing is this here, because this gets the voting adapter. And you've seen the API and the voting adapter already. So here's the voting adapter. Once again, has the clear, the vote, and the votes methods. And these are the 3 these 3 respective methods that are called in these services for this endpoint using this adapter iVoting. So there's not a lot of duplication. There's tiny hoops that we jump through to do permission checks and stuff like that, because it has custom permissions and so on. It's probably not perfect yet, but because there's some duplication, but it works fine. And the whole idea is that this is it's A, very similar to the logging endpoint, and B, it's a pattern to use when you need to write your custom endpoint, because they all look very similar. And if you deal with information gotten from specific content objects, this is a very repeatable pattern that you can use, copy and paste into your own packages. So this is then basically the endpoint. This was the votes, the information, the get. Vote. Let's look at the vote thing just quickly. There's something. It needs needs to allow to write the object. This is this line, and then it gets. This is also a pattern. it gets the information that is passed in the form, in this case not from classic Plone in the view-let, but in Volto in the React front end. It's passed basically in a form into the request, and JSON body self request gets the passed information, gets the rating from the request, and casts this rating as a vote. And then it returns vote info again, so it always has the current information on all votes. So this is basically the backend code, and Katja is going to take now over and explain to you all the magic that's going on in the front end to make this actually useful. Because all I did so far is write some Python code. Katja, take it away. You're muted.
So now we are switching to the front end. As you've seen, there's an endpoint prepared, and we will now see how to address this endpoint from the front end and display the fetch data. So this chapter is about communicating with the backend. We fetch data and we write data back to the backend. Those of you that already joined the training have seen the Volto app collective Plone comp site. We will use this existing package and extend it. We have a talk view where we see information about talk, and we add this section that you've seen with the information about votes of this talk, and the voting feature with buttons so that the review of the talk can post his vote. So to extend this talk view, we will write a new component. This is the code. We start with a new file, voting.jsx, and it's not a lot of code. It's some HTML JSX code here to display. It's dependent if there are already votes, then we can show information, average vote, the amount of total votes. If we have no votes so far, we can also display information about this. And what we need is the information about the vote of this talk we are on right now. So we need to fetch the data. And how do we do this? We use an use effect hook where we dispatch the action get votes. On-mount means that as soon as component is rendered, we will fetch the data, and the action comes always as a pair, action reducer pair. The action itself fetches the data, and the corresponding reducer writes the data to the App Store. And from the App Store, the component is able to read data, and the connection to the store is made by a subscription. You can see the subscription here. We want the data from the store in the constant votes, and the subscription makes this link to the store. And then we have in this constant the values that are originally fetched from the backend, that is provided by the endpoint, which gets the calculation from the adapter. So we have this data now in the front end and can display it here. And the action is dispatched here on mount, as I said. And this action is imported before we use it. And the action itself looks like on this. It's just some lines of code, and the action is defined by the request method get, and this is the votes is the name of the endpoint, and we address this endpoint on the address of the talk. So the backend knows which talk we want information about, and can now respond. And when the action is successful, it's responding with data, and the reducer then reacts and takes this data and writes it to the App Store. The App Store is a place where information for the whole app is saved, so that this component and every other component also can access this data, and the reducer does it by taking the actual state of the store and applying in the next line the response of the action. So this is the store, and then in the store we have this entry which corresponds to that what the endpoint provides, calculated by the adapter, plus some information about the action, if it was successful or if it's still loading. So, and yeah, so now we have the component written together with the action that can fetch data, and the reducer. With these three parts together, we can now integrate this component in our existing talk view. We have here the first part of a talk view. I have here the header, and afterwards I will integrate the voting component. Yeah, so we have something like this. This is our talk view, and so far we have no votes, and we can take the next step and let the reviewer vote, so that we have something to display. We add a section to our voting component. Mainly we want these buttons so that the reviewer can vote. If he has voted, we tell him, okay, you can only vote once. You've already voted. And these buttons need to trigger the communication with the backend to write the vote back to the backend. And the button therefore has this on-click handler, handle vote click, which same as the get votes action that is dispatched on the on-mount event of the component. This handler will dispatch another action vote that writes data back to the backend. It's requesting a vote on the talk, so it takes the path name and the actual vote value. This action is has to be imported, and the action itself then is similar like the previous one. It addresses the same endpoint on the address of the talk, and it has a request method post so that it can send the vote value to the backend. And as we've seen before, the component is already subscribed. So when the action is successful and it responds with the updated data of the votes, then the App Store changes, and that means that the subscribed component can react on this changed state of the App Store, and it will render itself. So the reviewer clicks, says, I approve this talk or decline or whatever. The action is dispatched, and the backend reacts and responds, and the App Store changes, and the component can now see, okay, this reviewer has voted on this talk, so I should hide the buttons and show screenshot. So this button has to be hidden, and this information about the talk has to be updated. And the component does this by listening to the App Store change and re-rendering. So we have the voting feature. Okay. So the reviewer can now vote. And I would like to mention that it's important to see that we do not calculate average votes or something like this, or check if the current user has the permission or role to vote, or if he already voted. We are asking the backend about this information. And the backend can respond with this information because we design the endpoint to the needs of the requesting front end. Yeah, this is my part. And there's another subchapter about the component state. So yeah, read on. I'll give back to Philip.
Thank you. I'll take over the screen sharing once more. And yes, thank you, Rico-Pekka. He's in the behind the curtain, organizing everything. So after smaller. So after this chapter 47 that does the votable. Oh, hang on, this link is not right. Let's see. Endpoints and then actions. Yes. After writing the front-end code for this behavior and this feature, this API that we designed, we're using that the whole add-on in the Plone conf package, Plone conf side package in the back end. The front end already uses it. It expects that to be there. It doesn't fail if there's no endpoint because the behavior is not available. It'll hopefully fail gracefully. Otherwise, we'll have to add that feature. But in the back end, we also I'll skip this part. Hang on. We'll use this now as a dependency in the setup PY. So this is basic Python development again. Added the profile as a dependency to our package so that the package is auto installed and the appropriate marker interfaces on the request are there and stuff like that. And then we add the behavior to the talk content type information that is so that this behavior is enabled by default. And then we're doing two nifty things, because this add-on is not intended written with the intention that the backend code of the add-on is not written with the intention to only be allowed to vote on, I don't know, in a certain state or by a certain group, but all editors or maybe even anonymous, I think by default anonymous users may be allowed to vote. And we changed this by changing the workflow of talks. Talks have a special workflow, especially to allow them to be submitted for review. And then we change this workflow or extend this workflow to to manage the custom permission view vote and do vote in the workflow, so that in the state pending, the group reviewers or the role reviewers in this case is actually allowed to vote. And once it's published, this is no longer possible, because then the talk is published. Another thing that is nifty in there that is not really real life usable for a conference. Probably if you're organizing a conference, you're going to do it differently anyway, and not do that in a voting session, because you sit down and you discuss these things, obviously. But it's a training. It teaches you development patterns. So it's don't think about that solving all conference solutions. There is a small subscriber. It's a nice example of how adaptable Plone is, and how you can utilize the power of one add-on that you pull in to do something that it's maybe not intended to do, but it's easily doable. In this case, once something is changed, there's an event thrown, then it will, or it should, it obviously doesn't 100%, it should check if a certain tally of reviewers, of a group of reviewers, has already voted, and then if the average vote is more positive than negative, this talk would be automatically published, so that you have like a full automated system. If, I don't know, you have 10 reviewers, 6 actually vote, and 4 of them are in favor of this talk, then the talk is published. As I said, in real life, you're probably not going to do that, but still, it is a nice example of reusing stuff that we do a lot in Plone. So this concludes our short sneak preview of this training. There's a lot more to learn about Plone development in this training, and we hope that you will give it a go. You'll find the training on trainingplone.org, along with all the other trainings. And as I said, we'll update the code and the information soon, I hope in time for World Plone Day. This is actually merged. There's going to be a version of the Mastering Plone 6 training for this year's conference, whether it's going to be online or in person, depending on the vaccination state of the world, is not to be decided by us. But Katja and me will certainly going to give a version of the training, either 2 full days if it's in person, or 2 half days if it's online. And we hope to see you there. And please give us feedback on the trainings and visit the training. Thanks to all the trainers, especially thanks to Katja, who wrote most of the front-end code for the Mastering Plone 6, and all the other people who helped make Plone trainings a reality. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the World Plone Day. And thank you, Riku Pekka.
Thank you. See you